Hi everyone, my name is Leah Kopke and I'm a 3D motion design freelancer. I also have a podcast where each week I cover another 3D modeling tool for Cinema 4D. Hello and welcome. Congratulations if you've made it this far, because today we're going over the very last sculpting brush inside of Cinema 4D. So let's go ahead and jump into Cinema 4D and talk about Amplify. Here we are. Now, as usual, I'm going to switch over to my sculpting mode. You can find that in the upper right here. And now that we have this open, we're going to drop a cube into our scene. And I like to see how many subdivisions I'm creating while sculpting in here. So I'm going to turn on the lines. I just did that here, garage shading lines. And then we can make this editable by hitting this button down here. Or while having our cube selected, we can use the C hotkey. They both do the same thing. And you can find our Amplify brush is right over here. And it's really useful for exaggerating what you've already sculpted. So in order to show that, I think it'll actually be helpful to use another tool on here. So we're going to use the repeat brush that we've actually covered last week. If you want to learn about that, you can in the last episode. And I'll go ahead and subdivide this cube a few times right over here so that we can get some really nice detail. Now this is getting pretty dense, so I won't go much further than this. If you have a pretty powerful computer, you can get a good amount of polygons before your computer can crash. But be careful of that. Save frequently, especially if you're subdividing and adding a lot of levels. Now that we've done that and we have our sculpting levels on here, I'm going to turn off our lines so that we can just see a little bit easier. I'll switch over to our repeat brush, open up our manager over here, asset manager, and in here I like to go into the presets, sculpting brush presets, and in here there's a texture folder, and I'm just going to use the zippers again as an example because I think they're easy to see the Amplify brush on. I'm going to grab this brush or this texture right over here, and I'm actually going to need to drop this into the stamp. So I'm going to click on the stamp tab, drop this in here for our repeat brush, and you can see it's appearing right over there. In our settings, I want to increase our strength. We have steady stroke on, that's looking good. And I'm just going to go ahead like this, and we can already see this showing up. I'll make it a little bit bigger for this example. So now we have this very nice zipper. I might want to turn on the modifiers and just smooth this out a little bit. That looks better. And on this note, let's use the Amplify. So I'll go over to the Amplify. And you can see that the basic settings are the same as usual with the brushes. So we've already covered these. I'll leave a link to the episodes covering these additional settings in here in case if you're interested. I named them after the tab they're in. I'm only going over what's unique to this brush because these repeat a lot. In the settings, we have the usual options in here. Something that is unique to this brush is the Amplify mode. So first of all, let's just use this with the option on, all turned on. So with all turned on is the Amplify mode. When I use the Amplify brush, you could see that it's exaggerating what's already there. And if I were to draw a zipper with the repeat brush again, but this time I'll go into the stamp and I'll adjust the gray value. So we have some of the surface going in and some of the surface coming out. You can see how that looks a little bit different than the first one we drew. And now I'll use the Amplify on there. So the Amplify, right now what it's doing is it's making the higher areas higher and the lower areas are actually being lowered further. So that is how it's exaggerating the texture on here. So it'll exaggerate whatever you've done already on your mesh. I'm going to hit undo a couple times. That's Control Z on PC or Command Z for Mac users. And in our Amplify, we were discussing this Amplify mode. So you have the option to amplify just the crevices or the ridges. So the crevices are the areas that go below. We can just amplify those. And you can see, if you look really closely here, that they're actually being lowered as I move my mouse over them. You can also amplify the ridges. If you only have ridge on, it'll only heighten areas that are already above the surface, that are already a little bit higher. So it can sense which parts of your mesh are lower and going in and which parts are coming out. And if you turn on all, it'll affect both with the Amplify brush. You have your usual stamp settings in here, so nothing new here or unfamiliar. The stencil settings are the same as usual, nothing new here or unusual once again. You have your modifiers. If we turn these on, you can overlay other brushes with your Amplify brush. If you turn on the smooth, it will add the smoothing brush to the Amplify brush. If you check on draw, it'll add the draw brush that we've covered already to the Amplify brush. So you're using two brushes at once. You can layer the pinch brush, you can layer the inflate brush, and you can control the strength of each brush here with the slider. And by turning it on, so you can control the strength here, similar to how for our main brush we can control the strength and our settings right over here. So we can increase the strength for the Amplify, and you can increase the strength for whatever tool you're using along with it. So that pretty much wraps up this brush here for today. I really hope you found this helpful, and if you did and you'd like to learn more 3D modeling tools and techniques, please hit like and subscribe. Once we wrap up the sculpting tools, I'm thinking that it may be fun to get into 3D modeling a library, and all the different elements for it. I think that would be really fun. So that will be coming pretty soon. So I hope you'll stay tuned and get through all of these episodes so that we can get into some 3D modeling for fun, creating something, creating a library and all the assets for it. You could see that we've covered the brushes in here. We've covered all the mesh tools already. So you have a pretty large base of knowledge for 3D modeling. So I think we should use our base of 3D modeling knowledge to do something fun. So I think this would be a fun project. And if you stay tuned, you'll get to hear more about it. So I hope you'll subscribe and stick around, and I'll see you next week here on Ambient 3D Animations.